Welcome to the Fedora Podcast. This is episode 24. This is a podcast where we teach you. Uh, I had a script. It was awesome, and the script moved on me. So this is the podcast where we teach you all about how the Fedora community works. We bring you news, interviews, and so much more. On today's episode, we'll be talking to our guest, Matthew Miller, the Fedora project lead, and we're going to be talking about this little thing that happened just a few weeks ago called the Fedora Linux release. Maybe some of you all have heard about that. But without further ado, here is my friend and co-host, Mr. Matthew Miller. Welcome to the Fedora Podcast.
Hey, glad to be here. It does feel like longer than a few weeks ago, but I think I still remember some of it. So we can.
Right. So yeah, we had the release and then we had some shuffling and some schedule changes and it was just all kinds of crazy. But we are here, we are live, and really excited to bring a podcast to you on this Tuesday afternoon. So I got to admit, I had to go back and look at the show notes because I've actually been running Fedora Linux Workstation 38 for probably close to 2 months now, and that's just because I kind of took on the beta.
Yeah, I tend to upgrade right around like beta freeze time as well. At least one of my systems, being a huge nerd, I have more than one computer to upgrade, so I kind of stage things out and keep one safe just in case, so I will not be cut off from the world if I mess up my own OS. But um, yeah, it's it generally kind of adds all that attention around getting the release together, and when things get into the frozen state, tend to be pretty good and interesting. If you like to live on the leading edge of things, that's a nice way to do it. But we also do put a lot of work in making sure that the final release has the polish and lives up to the expectations, and kind of the drama going down to the wire each time of will we be able to bring everything together kind of shows how much the QA team takes that seriously and how much that really does make sure each release is really nice.
Yeah, and we'll talk about release a little bit, the release process a little bit later in the episode, because we kind of hit a milestone this last time. So we'll circle back to that. But first, for those that are new to the podcast, new to the community, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I am the Fedora project leader, and I've done that for, I guess, 9 years now, almost 9 years next month, I think, is the thing, which has been a while. I've been involved in Fedora since even longer before that. It's a project that I really love, and it's my family in a lot of ways. I um, am a distinguished engineer at Red Hat. That's what this fancy top hat here is for. That's actually from some of y'all. When I got that promotion, people thought that the normal Red Hat Fedora didn't quite sound distinguished enough. So I don't know, got that. So I'm pretty happy about that. Um, as Fedora project leader, kind of my job is to try and keep everything on track and to make sure that the project, sort of the natural state of any open source project is to go in every direction at once, which is cool because
It's
it
accurate.
lets you explore a lot of different areas and ideas, and we want to make room for that. But also, if we want to have a big impact, we want to make sure that we're actually uh, being relevant to people other than ourselves. We want to make sure that we are, kind of leading the world in Linux distros. We need to talk about where we want to go and agree on strategy. So trying to get those conversations to be useful and functional is a lot of my job. Also, basically everything that goes wrong is ultimately my problem. So I try to make sure that um, few things go wrong as possible. I guess that's the.
So in most communities, I'd say that it's like herding cats, but that's not how you see your role.
Yeah, I mean, well, you can't herd cats, anyways. But that's, I mean, part of that metaphor is about the futility of doing that. People are here because they want to do something. They're interested in the community. They're interested in what we're doing, and telling them that they are now part of a herd that is going to be shuffled in a certain direction it's just not going to work. So it's more of you got to listen to people, and I have my own ideas, but listen to what people are interested in collectively, and try and make sure people are empowered to do those in the best way possible. Um, so I don't know. I don't know if I've got a cat-based metaphor for this, but
Yeah, I'm not sure that that metaphor survives the transition into the Fedora community, but I like how I like how you present yourself as, I am the chief point of contact, not the lead. I'm the person you go to when all else has failed, kind of an approach.
yeah. Although that you can come to me at other times too. It's not limited to that. In fact, it's nice if it's not when it's a problem. I do try to help us. There's some things I try to push on, things that I think are important, or things that I see, collectively seem to be important that I try to push forward. So there's some amount of leadership there, I guess, I hope, but it really does come down to, making sure the community has the power.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know that the Fedora podcast has had you on a few times, and we'll probably have you on again here in the near future because we kind of want to talk about this one's more retrospective, but moving forward, we want to talk a little bit about where's the Fedora project going. Obviously, there's a lot of big plans with the Fedora project, and not to mention just the Fedora community is growing like crazy. So we definitely want to have you back on in the near future to kind of talk about future state, about your vision. I guess the community vision would be more accurate, but today we're talking a little bit about a release here, and forgive me, I'm having to look down to check the chat. So if you are joining us live, feel free to put in your questions and your comments. We'll address those as we go through the conversation today, because this is a conversation, not a presentation. So that's why
I,
we choose YouTube.
I see someone there has accused me of not being Matthew Miller. Um, there are a lot of people with this name. Um, yeah, so there you probably saw someone else. It's a good way, I guess, to hide if I need to. Uh, but of the Matthew Millers, I am this one, I guess.
The top hat wearing Fedora project lead version of Matthew Miller, I suppose.
Top hat owning, I don't actually wear it because it seems a little, I don't know. It's not quite on my humble brand. I don't know.
As Matthew and I have learned doing a few of these streams together, we can derail ourselves fairly easily. Like the conversation about having an IoT powered Roomba for monitors was part of our pre-show conversation. We should have recorded that. There's some great ideas for the future of microprocessors and so how about release?
Yeah, so this was a nice, smooth release. And as you said, there was an interesting milestone. So one of the things that I don't know, is a constant for a while was really an annoyance with the tech press. Our release process is all in the public. We publish our schedule, and you can watch what's going on. You can see the go no go meeting is there in public. It's not like a secret thing in a back room. We try to have no back rooms as much as possible, and so people seeing that process often would say this release is delayed again, late. Yep, that's Fedora, always late. And there were some times where we were actually really kind of off schedule, and it was several months later than we intended to. But often, what people were just seeing is that process happening in public. That if this were a closed source internal project, or even an open source project that was developed inside a company and then released, ta-da, here we made it for you. With that, basically all this stuff happens inside and secretly. You might not even know what the release date is, so it might miss targets by 2 months, and you'd never know. Excuse me, there's a cat walking right here. That is, yes, she wants attention. This is Izzy. She is wondering why I am not done with meetings for the day. Hello, attention. Okay, the release process.
Well,
internally, like
even
that
Red Hat
slip.
Enterprise Linux
Right.
doesn't publish release dates for that very reason. We
Yeah,
kind of have an idea of when it's going to land, but there's no published date, so it's very countercultural to have that entire process out in the public.
right. So we got tired of getting dinged for that all the time. So we are actually holding more closely to our published schedule because one of the changes we made is if we do slip on one release that doesn't reschedule the following release, we used to like add 6 months from whatever it came out to the next one, which made it a little bit unpredictable. And so now we have a fairly predictable, May or April, May, October, November, like that time frame. You can expect it, which is good for planning. But also, we made our schedule have a internal early target date, our target number one, and then the target date we tell people. And we always strive to hit the first one. But until now, we actually never have. We've hit the on time date several times, but that early target's never been quite ready. And so this time, there were a few outstanding bugs at the last minute, but everybody was so excited that for that possibility that QA team people like stayed up late and release engineering put things all together so we could have this early release.
I was sitting on that. I was kind of idling in the room on that Go No Go event just gosh a couple of months ago now, and it was kind of funny because the question came up like, did we do it? Are we done? I mean, do we push the big green button now? I mean,
Yeah, almost unexpected. So that was
right, but it was really cool to see, and with Fedora 39 planning already well and underway, I'd encourage all of you, if you're interested, to just sit in and kind of watch the process. It's amazing the amount of effort that goes into an operating system release of this scale.
Yeah, and we can always the cat tail on the screen again. Amazing. We can always use help finding bugs, finding. There's so much hardware out in the world, and it's amazing that Linux runs in so many different weird laptops and everything. We can't possibly test them all in some sort of formal way, so having everybody's tests and feedback helps us get a good idea of, if there is a problem with, some laptops aren't resuming from suspend. That happens all the time, and it's important to know, is that widespread? Is it a big regression? How, like, can we fix this thing? Should we block the release for this? If we block the release, what else? What are the consequences for other bugs and problems? So we want to, like, the more feedback we have, the better.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about it, because I mentioned that Fedora Linux 38 just came out a few weeks ago, and now we're already talking Fedora Linux 39, even some ideations around Fedora Linux 40. So I imagine a lot of our audience, having just moved into a video platform, I imagine a lot of our audience is fairly new to Fedora. Could you kind of describe a little bit what that release cycle looks like?
Yeah, so we do put out a new release every 6 months, which is fairly aggressive. Our goal is to integrate as much of the upstream software we can that's ready for consumption into something that's available for you to use, and to get it all working nicely together. And that's where our QA process goes. So in Fedora, we don't do very much development of the software yourself. We're bringing GNOME from the GNOME project, KDE from KDE, and Linux kernel, all those things are the upstream projects. So we bring them all together and integrate them. And we found that 6 months cadence is kind of a nice uh, way of working. We can put out a nice solid release, and then the QA and release engineering teams and everybody has a little bit of a breather. We can kind of work on the tooling and the processes and things for a while, and then back to putting the release together. Then each release has about a 13-month life cycle. So you can actually, if you 6 months sounds intimidating, you can skip the next release and just stay on that for basically a year and then do an upgrade. And we've worked really hard to make those upgrades really seamless. They're basically just like a big update that has, this time it's got a couple of gigabytes of updates, and then you should be on the next release. So that's basically the cycle. And then We try to make it so our updates policy is basically big changes should go in those release boundaries for some reasons, and because a lot of the people doing the work here are volunteers, we don't have a lot of backporting security fixes and bug fixes to software is a lot of work. You can often introduce new problems doing it. It's expensive. So that's our preferred thing. But if it's not possible and there's a security issue, we'll sometimes put a bigger update out during the release. But we try to make it so the big changes are really on those release boundaries so that you don't have a thing where you wake up one Tuesday and discover that your desktop is totally rearranged because the software is new.
Right. But one of the things you mentioned was being able to skip releases, and honestly, that's not been my experience with Fedora Linux, either in my home server lab or on my laptop. Like this device that we're streaming from today is running Fedora Linux 38. I even ran it on the beta for a few weeks. But the in-place upgrade process has been fantastic for a few years now.
You shouldn't need to, but if you want to, we make that an option for people. And everybody has kind of a different tolerance and taste for these kind of things. So we often get asked, where's the LTS? And so we've got the year there, which I think is a pretty good balance for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the last few releases have definitely been kind of that, well, this is just a big update, so I need to plan on not being on my laptop for 20, 25 minutes. But I mean, it's been fantastic. And Conan in our chat kind of voiced what I was thinking, but wasn't sure if I should say or not. So someone else said it. But yeah, if you want an LTS of Fedora, we call that Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I'm admittedly a little bit biased, being a technical marketer for RHEL, but
yeah, and that's how I know that is an expensive proposition to do.
Right.
And yeah, the amount of work to make that actually be maintained in a real way and for a long term, rather than just okay, now we stopped updating it, good luck, which is another approach to that. But one thing, it does seem like from the desktop point of view, it's sometimes a little bit like things are getting pretty nice and polished, and there's not dramatic change. Even when I said we want to make sure that things don't surprise you along the way. But often, when we're going to new GNOME releases now in Fedora Workstation, like you see a few things moved around, but it's not dramatically different because kind of the polish is there. And so sometimes it's a little bit hard to generate some excitement about the release. We actually have a lot of, I was looking back through the changes list, the features we have in this last release, and there's actually some really interesting, under the hood things I want to highlight that aren't visible but are going to make things better. One of them, there are steps towards what we call a unified kernel, where right now, this is getting into the geekiness of booting your system, but we have a thing called initial RAM disk that loads with it's basically like a kind of a minimal boot up operating system that is initially loaded, has some basic drivers and stuff, and then the kernel is loaded, everything's loaded from there, and then, the kernel loads. Anyways, from there, the real operating system eventually gets loaded. The problem with this is that is basically a vulnerability point because we don't sign that, and it kind of breaks the whole secure boot process. So we're moving to a thing where we have a unified kernel that all put together all in one without initial RAM disk, no netrd, and everything will be built and signed in infrastructure that will then have a much more secure chain from boot to actually running. So that's some steps are in place for that. There's also on a security, supply chain security thing, work towards reproducible builds. Reproducible build basically means if you make a package, if we build a package in our build system, you can build that same package, at home or wherever else, and you'll get a byte for byte identical output. Sorry, getting so excited, I'm talking faster than I can talk. So Debian has been working on this for a while, and we've been in some ways behind and the importance of that is you can basically we can show that you can trust us. I think you should know you can trust us, but previously, this lets you this is what trust but verify. I guess this lets you do
Hmm.
the verify part of that. So I
Right.
think that's a neat thing. Um, it's something where in some ways Debian is ahead on this because they were able to leapfrog because they're we have a central build system where all packages are built from Git trees and built in our in our server rooms in our data center and kind of a system under our control. So we have some basic trust in that, and then you can extend that trust. We sign the packages there. Whereas like in Debian historically, there was no central build system. Everybody built their packages however they wanted and then uploaded them, which there's like who knows what's going on? Is that person's machine compromised? Is all these things? So having those be reproducible was a pretty important step for them because they didn't have that. But it's something that would benefit us as well. It didn't quite feel the urgency, but as these things uh, get easier for us to do because maybe the work a lot of the work that Debian's done has made it easier for us. Um, we can bring that kind of security features to Fedora as well, which is nice to see.
Well, and thinking about the downstream effects of that, being able to run Fedora workstation across an enterprise, or being able to being able for those changes to filter their way down into RHEL. I'm thinking of large enterprises that have literally tens of thousands of servers, but to have that unified build, or I'm starting to conflate terms here. Having that identical build capability is amazing. To be able to know that whether I'm sending this little pizza box sized device out to a telephone pole somewhere, or if I have thousands of these little 2U boxes that are running in data centers across the world, it'd be good to know that everything is exactly identical on every single build.
Yeah, and so we have some other things like the OS tree stuff that is Core OS, IoT, Silverblue, Kinoite, those things, and then some other file system verification like things that kind of do the similar kind of thing across the whole image uh, as well that are in progress. Yeah, it's uh, some of these things seem like they're like big fancy enterprise, those 10,000 servers or whatever use cases, but they're also pretty useful for the home as well, where well, you may be running an IoT thing and you want to make sure there's no malware in there that's running crypto mining on your thermostat, or just on your on desktop, like being able to verify that the system is what you expect it to be
Hmm.
has that. It's nice to be able to trust your own machine. I guess that's
Right. Well, and you mentioned the home. I mean, here in our house, we've got a mix of Apple products. We've got, I think I've successfully eliminated all of the Windows partitions with the exception of I've got a couple of like AAA titles that absolutely don't work with Proton that I still boot into from time to time. But as my kids are getting older, our youngest is getting ready to start kindergarten this fall, and I'm looking at an age where I have things like a Chromebook or iPads in the house. It's like I don't really have much control over that. So instead, we could buy a whole bunch of low end, like netbook uh, capacity type laptops, and using things like Ansible, system roles, and some of these other tools that come naturally in Fedora. I can make sure that all of my kids have the same build. And they have all the tools that they need, and then inevitably when someone breaks their build, because like my son's showing an interest in technology, curious what dad does, probably more the YouTube side of what I do, but interested in technology nonetheless, and he goes and breaks something, I can easily just re-roll that image out and have
yeah.
all the data, all the user data off on like a server in our furnace room.
Yeah, actually, that's a really powerful thing. It's actually one of the things that got me like to where I am in my career. I had an early mentor, I guess, one of my parents' friends who had we couldn't afford a PC in our house, but he was a programmer for a bank. He had a PC, and I could come over and play with it after school. And he told me, you can do whatever you want. You can edit the config sys, change the auto exec bat. You can't break anything so badly that I can't fix it. It's going to be okay. Just go ahead and do whatever you want. And like that freedom to do that was very powerful in being able to learn. And I think, really like being given that permission and encouragement, go ahead, break it.
Right.
Is like essential to people, really getting to understand and knowing, how to work with computers. People who are hesitant to change things, that kind of afraid, what if I click that button and now it won't work? That could really hold back learning. So I think the more we can deliver an environment which makes it feel safe, the better we are at making people feel in control of their computing.
For sure. So that was really deep, technical, nerdy, which is where you and I spend most of our time. Why don't we zoom out a little bit and help some of the less crazy among us, maybe?
Okay.
One of the we were talking about how this release didn't really have any new shiny features, which, as someone who spends a lot of time doing marketing and content creation, is just maddening, because it's like this is what RHEL looks like nowadays. I've been on the last several releases on that front, and it's like, what do we talk about? Because it's just better improvements, better processes, and then I look at Fedora, and it's like it's the same thing. It's the same problem, except with Fedora Linux 38, we had a few new spins. We had one that was kind of promoted into an official spin. You want to kind of talk us through, I guess, first, let's level set, and what defines a spin, and what is the difference between something that is supported but not like a spin?
Yeah, so we've got several levels of things, and it is, I'm sorry, somewhat confusing. But we have basically a spin is a install media variant of Fedora, and so something like, I think, was it the Budgie desktop? Is that the one?
Yep.
All right, so that was available. You could install it, but there wasn't like a live CD media to run and test it, and basically have a budgie first experience, and so now there is. So that's what having a spin is. It is actually one of the things that I think we need to. Well, some of this is for the future, but part of the problem is we should separate the install media from the delivery and like what software you're running, what a lot of the teams running around, like making a spin is an elevation, and we should have a way to elevate those things that isn't just now you have install media, because the install media it's only used once. It isn't really that exciting. But it requires a lot of work and process and so on to do that well. So we need to rethink that a little bit. But yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
I was going to say, you and I could have an interesting conversation about image builder and letting people basically compile their own spins. Compile is not a good word. That's already used elsewhere.
Assemble.
Assemble, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Budgie desktop, and I had to look this up, was first packaged for Fedora 37, but now is a Fedora Linux 38 cattail. Fedora Linux 38. It's now one of the official spins, and then. The other one, and I'm going to completely butcher this, but Ceresia?
Yeah, actually, if someone else could say that out loud, I would. Anyone want to type it phonetically in the chat?
Right,
I don't know.
But it's kind of interesting because it's RPM OS tree meets Sway, which is a tiling window manager. So RPM OS tree is something that's rapidly gaining ground in the technology space, being able to do upgrades of your operating system separate of there we go. We have and I'm not even going to try.
Ceresia.
There you go. That's phonetic. Actually, now that you say that, I think I've heard other people call it that, Ceresia. So, yeah. So it's tiling window manager and RPM OS tree. So there's some conversation going on in the chat about OS tree and RPM OS tree being a future topic, and I definitely agree that we'll address that in a future episode.
the tiling window manager people. Wow, that it is a different way of thinking about the world. I appreciate you all. It's a Windows 1.0. That's who got the UI right. That's the movement. And I appreciate that we can make room for those things. If you would like to try out a different way of working with your Windows and your desktop, we have that available easily to you now.
Yeah,
I
I
do
wish I
think.
could say more, but you're absolutely right because I know several people that are i3 fanatics,
Oh, the
and it's just like I tried it for like a week, and
yeah,
it
the
was like
people
one of
who
those
love
30
it,
day things. I
like,
made it a week, and just like
yeah,
I cannot comprehend this.
the people who love it really love it. So if you haven't
Hmm.
tried it, you may find out that, wow, this is suddenly your native language, I guess.
Right.
Uh, One of the things, the names are fun, but kind of getting out of hand. Um, I think we need to figure out a way to. I would like to use the Fedora Atomic Desktop brand for all of these to kind of put them together because, yeah, OS Tree isn't really a great. I don't know. It not not that exciting of a brand, and it doesn't quite. It's not very descriptive from the top level point of view. It's not really immutable, so calling them immutable images, immutable like that's not really what they are. So but I need to check with the brand people at Red Hat to see if I can. Revive that. I've got a really nice Project Atomic T-shirt over there already and everything. So, yeah, so.
Let me know how that works out for you. From what I understand, that's a fairly charged term nowadays.
Yeah,
So
yeah, we'll see. Yeah, no, code names are fun, but like code names, when code names then become something you have to decode in order to make a decision about where you're going to go on a website, that becomes the wrong kind of code. Um, Here we found the tiling window manager fan. Pure productivity, says the comment. Yes, exactly.
yeah, that may be worth dragging you into writing a blog post there, Merrick. Maybe show me the error of my ways because I've been a GNOME
Yeah.
user for quite some time. I've tried KDE and there's things I like about it. There's things I like about GNOME more. I it's been a while, but I usually go back and forth. But GNOME is kind of where I live. But
Also
I'm
in the
kind of a
comments here. Oh, sorry.
I'm kind of a Walmart user of technology anyway. It's like about 80% of the defaults work fine for me. I'll tweak the other few things and have a happy life.
In the comments, they're talking about code names in general, release code names, and Mo Duffy from the design team points out that we still do have Fedora release code names, but they're behind the scenes as code names, and they're used as the sometimes a little bit far removed, but sometimes more direct inspiration for the wallpaper designs each release. So, and the wallpaper designs are like, that's a really awesome community process where people work together to go from these ideas inspired by the code names to the really awesome wallpapers we have in every release.
Yeah,
You
I
see it
mean
behind our
it's
pictures in the
uh-huh.
video here. That's
Yeah, and it's almost as the it's almost as if the Fedora podcast producer had an idea to put the Fedora Linux 38 wallpaper
yeah,
as the background for a Fedora
nice.
Linux 38 conversation. But so the other spin that garnered some news in Fedora Linux 38 is Fosh, which admittedly I didn't really know was still going. Do you have sorry to throw you
That's
under the bus here, but do you have
yeah,
much to
that's
say
the
on that
that's the
front?
mobile one, right?
Yep,
Uh,
mobile.
I'm glad to see that there is starting to be like usable hardware that people can play around with these kind of things on. It's I Neil's going to be in the chat, like looking carefully at what I say, because I was pretty pessimistic about Fedora on mobile for a long time, and it's a hard market. It's a hard thing where Microsoft couldn't succeed; they backed out. But hopefully, I don't know, it's starting to be enough. Uh, it's one of those things where just like computers, like the first in the 80s or whatever, in the 90s, like every new computer was like 20 times better than your previous computer, and so like just the jumps were so much, and phones and everything were that way for a long time, and so it was basically impossible to make something that was maybe workable at a hacker
Mm-hmm.
level. And so now I think the technology's gotten to the point where it's you know the Pine phone and whatever devices don't have to be the top of the line Google whatever Apple thing to still be pretty amazing and be a functional thing that you can do. So I'm glad to see that happening. I'm glad to see Fedora Linux running on there because it's a nice place where you can take control back of your life and your privacy and not have that all owned by big companies.
Yeah, I think you struck a nerve with Conan there.
Yeah. Was that nice enough for you there? Um,
Yeah, Ray Green brings up a good point on that front too. Just I
yeah,
remember the old jokes about buying a computer and it's out of date before you even open the box. I think that was a Weird Al song at one point too.
yeah, and there was some time where like you wouldn't buy the latest generation of laptops if you wanted to run Linux because they
Mm-hmm.
probably wouldn't you probably wouldn't. You had to buy last year's laptops, so that happened there too in some ways.
Yeah, and nowadays, I mean, we've got a partnership between Fedora and Lenovo, and you can literally buy Fedora pre-installed on a laptop now. I mean, it's an amazing world.
Yeah, and we should get Mark from Lenovo on this at some point. I think that would be a good one.
Lenovo is one of the episodes on my backlog list, so
Okay, excellent,
I'm
excellent.
so glad you mentioned that. So if you haven't noticed, we're kind of finding our footing again with the Fedora Linux podcast or the Fedora podcast. Sorry, just put Fedora in front of anything, and there's probably a project or a community inside the larger community about it. But it's we've got a lot of ideas, always open to more. So free public service announcement. We've got a podcast room on the matrix space. We've got a category on the Fedora discussions page. There's stuff everywhere. So feel free to join in and submit some content ideas. Volunteer yourself as a guest or as a guest host. Either way. While I love doing live streams, while I'm very honored to be the host of the Fedora podcast right now, it shouldn't just be my mug on this podcast. So definitely feel free to get involved. Free public service announcement there in between the Fedora release talks. So you mentioned getting things from upstream, and there's been a lot of talk about the GNOME Foundation and the GNOME project since the move from GNOME 3.x to GNOME 40, and Fedora Linux 38 came pre-installed with GNOME 44. Excuse me. And kind of like Fedora Linux itself, there wasn't much in the way of changes there. There's a lot of updated updated looks, some rehabbed settings panel. Anything really stick out to you?
Well, I really like the podcast, so audio is important. I like the thing where you can easily switch between sound outputs and inputs on the quick menu. I think that's really nicely done. That's all come together pretty well. I use that quite a lot. But yeah, and yeah, I think some of the settings are a little more slick now. But yeah, it's really like not a lot of big change here. I don't know. I think. Sometime soon, I think they're probably going to have a dock option. It's very controversial in the GNOME world, um, but most distros ship with that by default. For Fedora Linux, if you like that, there's extensions you can add. We don't have that configured by default, but we've done some user research and it's pretty popular. So it'll be interesting to see. That'll probably be the next big UI change you see in GNOME. But I'm not even going to bet when that could possibly be.
Yeah, I mean the top right menu is fantastic. Pretty much everything that I need to make changes to is right there as a quick access drop down now. Even some of the add-ons, like I use the caffeine add-on so that my system doesn't go to sleep. Like if I'm on a meeting or something and I get up and pace around and I'm not there at the keyboard, I don't want it to go to sleep in the middle of a meeting. So like caffeine is one of the plugins that I always use, and having all of that right there to be able to even if I wanted to tether my laptop to my iPhone, it's right there. It's easy to get to. The menus are all there. The settings are all there, and you can drop it down uh, to make changes as needed. Especially as a content producer, like you said, the audio input output changes is fantastic. It's nice to have it right there, easy to get to.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's taken like that menu's changed a lot over the releases. It's one of those things that's subtle and it's gotten better and better and better. I think
Hmm.
some of the small changes that you don't quite notice at the time, but then if you go back and look from several years ago, you're like, oh yeah, this has really gotten a lot of improvement based on actual use and input and so on. I noticed a comment a while back about bugs and bug tracking and bug reporting.
Yeah, that
I'd like to. I think
was
that's a
towards the
useful
top of the
thing to
show.
talk about
Yeah.
if it could stick in there. So the comment was basically that bug reporting is a hurdle and a hassle, and are there any plans to streamline the process? Um, Yes, loosely, I would say. And we have a forcing function coming up here, which is actually that. So the Bugzilla instance that we use for tracking all of our bugs in Fedora is shared with us by Red Hat. It's the bugzilla.redhat.com instance. And that's actually like a big, it's big, slow, and a lot of work to maintain that. And for whatever out of my control reasons, Red Hat is switching everything to Jira internally for all of the RHEL development, which is kind of a crisis because we're not going to switch to Jira for Fedora for not merely because I personally don't like it, but that is true. But also, it's not open source. That doesn't feel right. And also, it is a very heavyweight tool that actually, if you want to use it effectively, you basically need someone on every team who is like your Jira expert and configuration person, or else you will end up not being very productive. And that doesn't seem right for Fedora. Bugzilla is nominally not going away, but on the other hand, no resources are really going to be put into it. And if the dedicated cranky sysadmins, not cranky, they're but old school sysadmin people who are keeping Bugzilla running, I think as kind of a passion project almost, like that's not a like we shouldn't be depending on that. So we're going to need to find another solution for bug tracking. And I think that's a good time for us to kind of think about the overall process overall, because um, there's it can be very, because as I said, like we're an integration project, like we're not doing a lot of the development, but we want to be kind of the first responders to people's problems. Uh, Yet also people doing the packaging are often volunteers, people who are not necessarily there all the time. They don't have a lot of time for helping diagnose everything. We kind of get a where should I have asked this question? Where should I put this bug kind of thing? And um, it is also the case that filing a good bug report is a skill or maybe even an art that not everybody has. And then getting the information needed to actually solve things is difficult. So this is a long way of saying I actually think we need some different layers to things. And main the main thing I want to do is I actually looked at, we had a page about when should I file a bug that was written, I don't know, 2004, 2005 or something like that, very early on. And it basically said all the time, if you see anything, if you see something, file a bug. Like that's TSA kind of level of and actually like that's not what we really need, because a bunch of bugs that need to be triaged and may not get answered, that ends up with this frustrating thing we have where when we automatically close all the bugs, we uh, the things we don't get to, we say, "Oops, sorry, we didn't get to that," and then people who feel ignored, and it's frustrating all around. So I want to send people to Ask Fedora, to the forum Q&A site first when you have a problem. You talk about it there, and people can help you solve your problem, can help figure out, where is this something that is Fedora specific? Is this something that is maybe something we can address in Fedora, or should this be taken, to KDE? Should this be taken to GNOME? Should this be taken to Firefox rather than to Fedora tracker somewhere? And then when appropriate, find or file a bug, in Fedora packaging space, in Bugzilla, or whatever we end up with, but make the end user experience be really centered around that kind of forum based help approach rather than about filing a bug. Just kind of like how I don't know, if you are a customer of a Linux company, like you can file a bug in Bugzilla, but your more direct approach is to talk to your support people, and they can hook things up. And so we kind of have our community-driven support, where we want users to come to, and then hopefully become maybe contributors, and more confident in and filing bugs, and knowing where things go. But if you're kind of in that I don't know what to do state, go to Ask. That's true today. That's the best thing to do, and I think we'll make that more and more centered in the future.
Gotcha. Yeah. And Mo Duffy pointed out, what about GitLab? Which, as a former GitLabber, I can say, yeah, we should look at GitLab and not Jira.
Yeah,
Although Rel Engineering looked at me and just was like, no.
yeah, right. GitLab is high on the list of possibilities. I can get into some technical details, but it's probably too boring for the podcast. But yeah, I think that's the front runner, really. But we have to work out, actually how to get it running in our own instance and things like that, and get that to be supported.
So in the light of being open and transparent, doesn't necessarily have to be negative, but had a question that I wanted to surface for you. What's something that could have gone better in the development of Fedora Linux 38?
That's an excellent question. Actually, I think this one really did go really smoothly. We haven't done we're in a little practice of doing retrospectives for a while, and we are not this time, but I think it's a good thing to do. Things really did go so smoothly this time that I don't quite feel like there was a problem, but I'm probably jinxing it. But some of it really is also, that release. I'm already thinking 39 and 40, and so
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the specific things. There are
Well,
definitely
and
things we could always do better.
but
But
I think there comes a time where you do have to take a step back and celebrate that. I mean, releases and like Conan Kudo mentioned, like Fedora Linux 37 hit some pretty substantial roadblocks, and that's been kind of an issue in the past where things have really derailed the release process, and so you're looking at missing targets, or at least mentally thinking, man, we should have been ready for this. We should have been there. So I think there comes a time where you do have to take a step back and go, you know what, we did a really good job. Could we have done better? Always. But Fedora Linux 38 should now be the new bar at which each release should try and hit.
yeah, and I think everybody, again, like going back to the beginning, like it's everybody working so hard to make this happen that made that happen. So I think we, as a collectively, everybody just did such a great job in this that. Thank you, everybody. Congratulations. All of those things all together.
There you go.
Um,
Let's see. So about the only thing left we'd had to talk about was some of the deeper stuff, like in Fedora Linux 38, micro DNF was replaced by DNF version 5. It's really quick. I can say.
yeah, and uses a lot less memory, which is actually,
Mm-hmm.
this is timely because I don't know, we were starting to actually get complaints. Like there's some updates that, like, people couldn't upgrade their systems because the memory consumption of DNF was so high that they actually couldn't do the upgrade all at once. And it wasn't even like a super low memory machine, so that couldn't come soon enough. I just wish they'd decided to rewrite it in Rust. And I'm only half kidding.
I could say things about that, but I'm not. I'm too tired. It's too late in the day.
Yes, we were a week early. Mo, we talked about that earlier, but
Yeah, so everybody give Mo a hard time because I think she'll be our next guest. Because as mentioned in the comments a little bit earlier, the new website was also released the same day, and so we're going to have Mo and maybe a couple of members of her team on to talk about the big website refresh project that's been going on for well over a year. See, the only other
yeah.
thing I'm sorry, if you wanted to comment, go for it.
I was just going to comment that that's a really amazing like community building success story because of all the people who came together to make this. We kind of were in a period there where we didn't have a functional team, and then people, Ashlyn, a whole bunch of people came together to design and build and run this thing, and we have a really great functional team of a lot of like new faces in Fedora and some old people who've been around for a while who are more energized about it, and it's a very cool thing. Yeah. I'm hesitant to start listing people because I know I'll forget someone, but I will let Mo do it here.
And I figure if I put her on the spot, then I'll find the people that want to be interviewed on a video podcast. The only other thing that I had on my list was some stricter compiler flags. I know that's super into the weeds, but it kind of filters into what you were saying earlier about having a little bit better security, being able to trust what it is that you're installing.
Yeah, this is one of the things. The compiler flags basically, when you're building the source code into binary machine code, there are certain new features that are always being developed, either in the CPUs or just in the compilers themselves, that make it harder to exploit. If there's a bug, you can make it harder to hack the system and get around. Turn those bugs into exploits that let you get root access and do bad things. So we tend to be pretty aggressive in turning on those new features as they come out, which is actually one of the things that is part of Fedora's function as a distro in the world. I think that doing that helps us find problems with those and find cases where those more strict flags actually cause bugs or they interact badly with something that a program was expecting to do. We help identify those, and then we work with the projects, the upstream projects, to fix them and make sure that their code works in a way that if we weren't doing that, you would have a whole haphazard mix of software that was or wasn't using all these features. And so by working on that across the board, we really elevate the security of software in Linux and overall in general.
So we're getting close to the top of the hour. We've pretty well addressed the conversations and going on in chat. Is there anything you want to mention about Fedora Linux 39, or just any closing thoughts in general?
Oh, see, I should have had a Fedora 39 thing prepared, but no, it's in progress. We're working on it. If you're feeling really brave, you can upgrade to the Rawhide release that will become Fedora Linux 39 in a little bit. I'm not sure what's in store there. One of the things, we don't tend to have a year ahead roadmap, so we'll see what people bring to it and see what improvements end up making it. I'm sure it's going to be yet again our best release ever. So that's the trajectory we're on. So
I could make a year of the Linux desktop joke right about there, but
we're
save it.
We're getting there. We're getting there. It's already here. If you some of us, right?
Right. Well, I got to say thank you, Matthew, for all that you do for the Fedora community. Thank you to the folks in the audience and to those who listen after the fact for all the hard work. The Fedora community is an amazing place to hang out, and I'm really really excited to finally be a bigger part of that. It took me a while to figure out where I could hang out in the Fedora community and kind of contribute back, but for years, Fedora has been my go-to. If I'm not running RHEL, then it's usually Fedora. Um, so it's really really an honor and really a lot of fun to be a part of this community, to be bouncing ideas back and forth. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, really appreciate all the ideas for content. What I could really use right now is volunteers to jump on the stream and to have about an hour long conversation. So if that's something you're interested in, please reach out to myself or the Fedora Podcast Matrix channel. Really appreciate everybody, and congratulations on Fedora Linux 38. I mean, it has been amazing. The only thing I might do is do a fresh install and try Btrfs, but that'll have to be for a quieter season. I'm in the midst of kicking this podcast back off. Red Hat Summit, RHEL release is imminent, and so definitely a lot to be excited about in the community.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you very much for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah, glad to have you. I was going to say kick it back off, but Joseph had to jump in front of that bullet last minute, and
thank you.
Hey, we had fun. We chatted and we joked around for an hour. It was a great time.
Glad you were able to make it work.
Well, thank you for joining us. This was episode 24 of the Fedora Podcast. Make sure to check out the show notes for links and additional resources pertaining to this episode. Give me a couple of hours to get that done. I do have another presentation after this, but check the show notes a few hours. If you're catching this after the fact, should be chapter markers, additional resources, and whatnot in the show notes. We'll be alive. Actually, we won't be alive in 2 weeks. I didn't update that in the episode guide. In 2 weeks, I will be at Red Hat Summit, and Matthew, I think you'll be there. So
yeah,
if
we're not going to do it live from Red Hat Summit.
I mean, we could try. I mean, I'll have recording gear there. We could try it.
Let's try it. See what happens.
Okay. It'll be at a different time than this time slot. But hey, I am more than happy to throw something together. Let's do it. So
right, sounds great.
In about 2 weeks, we'll be live, possibly from the floor of Red Hat Summit. But for sure, the next kind of typical episode will be in a month, in 4 weeks, and we'll be discussing the website property refresh. So with that said, see you all live from Summit. Be sure to connect with both Matthew at MattDM just about everywhere, and I'm at IT Guy Eric and pretty much everywhere as well. So if you want to reach out to either of us, definitely come and check us out. On behalf of Matthew Miller, my guest today, myself, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and the entire Fedora project community, we will see you next time.